Hi all, it's Jason Puckhead Diebold here, live from Erie, Pennsylvania, and it's time for another edition of Drive Time University. So I'm working with a group of other amazing leaders at this business, and it's really cool. Like when you work with a group like this, we've got founders in the group, we've got all the star diamonds you can think of, the elite coaches, the old timers, the new people that are just ripping it up. So it's really cool to be part of that. And the topic that I'm talking about this week is volume. So we've already done one video, and then yesterday was just kind of like another motivational post about how volume, and weak leg volume in particular, lines up with income and also with these new team ladder leadership achievements and ranks. So it's a pretty cool thing, and it's one of these things like, I'm not always driven by like being elite or some of the recognition stuff, but it's like whenever there's a new thing like this, like organizational leader, like that's something like I really aspire to do. And you have to build the team builders and the organizational leaders to get the executive leader position. So it's a really important thing. But talking more today about volume, I kind of took for granted everybody knew the difference between PV and TV. PV stands for personal volume, and it's the volume that you personally sell or buy yourself, as opposed to TV, which is team volume, which is the volume of all the products that your coaches on your team either buy or sell themselves. And all the individual PVs of all the coaches on your team kind of combine to be your team volume or your TV. And the important thing is how that ranks on each leg, and then that's kind of what defines your strong leg and your weak leg based upon which leg has the more volume on it. So when it comes to building this business, building a great income, getting those volumes up, again, I talked about in the first video the other day that the main majority of your income that'll be residual money will come from cycle bonuses. And a cycle happens when you have 200 PV on one side and 100 PV on the other side, and those numbers are TV, team volume, not PV. Sometimes I use those terms interchangeably, but that's a TV number. So one of the mistakes I often see coaches make is that they do tons and tons of volume through their first business center. So let's say you personally can do 1,000 PV a week. Is it best to do that PV yourself, or would you rather have that extra 1,000 PV on your strong leg? Because think about it, when you do commissions yourself, just in terms of PV, is that volume show up on your left leg or on your right leg? And that's another one that I'm gonna leave the question up in the air. Put the answer down in the comments. But think about it. Where does your PV go? And if you could do it by design, you would take all the PV that you can generate and you'd want to put in your weak leg, because more and more that's going to lead to more cycle bonuses and bigger residual income checks. So that's one thing to think about. And then one of the things I talked about in the last video is that it makes sense to put a family member somewhere in your weak leg. And the rule with Beachbody is U+2, which really means that you can pay for yourself off your own credit card, and you're allowed to pay for 2 other coaches that are family members that live with you with your own credit card. And I've actually done a little online analysis about how the money in that all works out if you add up everything that you'll spend as opposed to everything that you can gain from being an Emerald right off the bat. And I did that on a website called emeraldcostanalysis.com. So if you want to look at the actual numbers of what it would take to sponsor 2 family members, go ahead and check out that website. But I think the important thing is when you do that, now you have a family member that you can put commissions through. And so it gives you the opportunity, instead of keeping all the volume as only PV, now you can do the volume as PV for your family member, but also it counts as TV towards your team cycle bonuses. So let's just say that you'll get a $30 commission off of Shakeology. And that's, kind of roughing the numbers out a little bit. and let's say that it's about 100 PV, or really it's 90 PV. But so every time you sell Shakeology, you're gonna make about a $30 commission. But if you can sell Shakeology on your weak leg under a family member per se, then you're also gonna get that $18 bonus as a diamond, because you're doing a cycle with an extra 100 PV on your weak leg. And I think that's the great opportunity, and something I think people often overlook when they do a lot of retail through their first CBC. You know, longer term, and I understand this group is to get towards diamond, but longer term, as you can get to 2-star, one of the best investments that you can make is to put your second CBC in your weakest position under your first CBC, and that way it'll generate more volume in that weak leg again. In fact, if you've got a family member, maybe it can be on your weak leg under a spouse's weak leg too, and that way you can actually get 3 checks, 1 commission, and 2 cycle bonuses off of just 1 order. And that's where Team Beachbody and the comp plan can really, really become quite profitable and lucrative. Okay, the other things that I wanted to talk about is what happens if you are really uneven in your 2 legs. You know, like the team leadership ladder is working on a weak leg volume, and it does that because you could have all the volume in the world. You could have 5 million volume points in your strong leg, but if you don't do any work in your weak leg, you'll never get any income from that. So Beachbody wants to encourage you to earn higher and higher incomes by encouraging you to get weak leg volume, which is why that's one component of the leadership ladder. One of the things I've noticed with other network marketing companies is when you achieve a certain rank, you're kind of guaranteed a set income, and that's not the case with Team Beachbody. Team Beachbody puts limits on each rank, so it's more of a ceiling than it is like a definition of how much you'll earn. But with the team leadership ladder, if you look at it that way, there definitely is a minimum earning that will happen every time you get the next rung on the ladder. So that's one of the reasons why they did that. But I want to talk about here, if you've got a really strong leg, really weak leg, what happens with all that extra volume that comes in on the strong leg. So we know at this point it takes 200 volume points and 100 volume points to do a cycle. So let's say you've got 400 volume points on your strong leg and only 100 on your weak leg. Well, when you do a cycle now, it's going to subtract 200 from that strong leg, subtract 100 from the weak leg. You'll be left with no volume points left on the weak leg, but you'll be left with 200 volume points on the strong leg. So what happens to that volume? Does it just disappear? Does it save? What happens? And yeah, it does save. As long as you stay an active coach yourself, which is, you know, the 50 PV every 5 weeks that you either buy or sell yourself. And one of the best ways to make sure that you're always active is just to be on Shakeology Home Direct yourself, and you'll always stay active. In fact, you're guaranteed to stay active. Even if somebody returns a product that's more than 90 PV, you'll be guaranteed to stay active because you're on Shakeology Home Direct. So that's a really great opportunity. But as long as you stay active, you accumulate this carryover volume. So I was talking with one girl in the group last night who said she had, I think, 170,000 volume points on her strong leg. So she was getting confused, the weekly volume versus the carryover volume. And her carryover volume was huge, and her weekly volume on that leg was pretty good too. So what is this carryover volume? And I think the best way to think about carryover volume is thinking about it as almost like a checking account at a bank. You know, there's a bank that's got all this extra money saved up, and every time you can do volume on your weak leg, you get to write yourself a check for $18 from that savings account that you have built up in carryover volume. So it's not really discouraging if you've got a huge carryover volume. In fact, that's a very encouraging scenario, because instead of you having to do all 300 volume points, 200 on the strong leg, 100 on the weak leg, all you have left to do or create is volume on the weak leg. So every 100 points on the weak leg, you'll be getting a check for $14, $16, or $18 depending on your rank. So it's really a huge opportunity. And with my business, you know, I've got a really strong leg that can do over 1.5 million volume points every week. So you can imagine the accumulated carryover volume over there is huge. And every once in a while you experience this thing where all your carryover volume wipes out, and so you're like, wow, what is that? And what that is it's called a I have it here in my notes. Sorry, it slipped my mind for a second. It's called a flush, or a volume flush. Master flush is what they call it. And a master flush happens whenever you personally do 5,000 lifetime cycles. So think about it. Every time you do a cycle, you make $14, $16, or $18. As soon as you do 5,000 of those cycles, whatever carryover volume is left in your account gets wiped out, with the exception, so everything goes away from the weak leg, everything from the strong leg goes away, with the exception of they leave 5,000 volume points in your strong leg. But you know, if you had accumulated 10 million volume points over there, you had this huge bank account. Every time you do 5,000 cycles, whatever is in that bank account gets wiped out. So that's one reason that you really want to work on that weak leg volume kind of as quickly as possible, so that you don't lose out on that huge bank account that you've accumulated with your seniority and by staying active in the company. And if you do get a carryover or a master flush, you know, which happens to me all the time now, and I cry because it's millions and millions of TV that gets wiped away, it's really not the worst scenario in the world as long as that volume keeps coming in on the master leg or on the strong leg, because within you know, the next week or 2 weeks, you're going to see that carryover volume start to accumulate again. But the most important thing there is you staying active personally, so that you do accumulate that nice savings account. So I guess overall, I just wanted to talk about the difference between PV and TV, talk about why it's important to put as much of your commissions beneath you in your weakest spot possible in your business. Make your commissions become TV, not just PV. And wanted to talk about the master flush and how that works. So I know a lot of people were being confused by some of the numbers, and I understand that some of these numbers can be confusing. And I also believe, you know, it's my belief, throw it away if you don't like it, that when we say we're not good at math or we're not good at numbers, it's really just kind of an excuse for us not to pay attention to some of the things that are pretty important. So in this business, like cycle bonus, residual income, and volume is pretty important. So I know it can be a little confusing, but really break it down easy. And Michael Neiman has a video that I'll post under here that explains, you know, cycling, explains master flush, and he does it with, you know, his kids' Light Bright, or like little play animals and play toys that he has. And I think it's a real easy way to understand it. So although everybody's not as good at math as I am, you know, I was an electrical engineer that had to take a class on differential equations, whatever those were. So supposedly I'm good at math. But even if you're not, like, I think you really need to understand the basics of this. So just as an example, you know, we talked in that first video about setting an income goal. So what happens if you do have some of this carryover volume? How big of the bank account is actually there? So I wanted to do a couple different scenarios. Say you've accumulated 10,000 volume points in your strong leg for carryover volume. And I think that's pretty doable, you know. Give this business a little while, get some team leaders to take off, and you will see that volume start to accumulate. So say you have 10,000 volume points in your carryover volume. How can we figure out what that's actually worth? So you take that number, 10,000, divide it by the amount of volume points you need in your strong leg to cycle. And by this point, you should know that's 200 in your strong leg, 100 in your weak leg. So 10,000 divided by 200, that comes up with 50 cycle bonuses that you have the potential to do. So times the number of cycle bonuses that you have the potential for by the amount that you're going to make depending on your rank. Emeralds make 14, rubies make 16, diamonds make 18. So let's assume everybody's going to be a diamond by the end of this group, so you're going to make $18. So 50 times 18 comes out to be $900. You've got a bank account in the form of accumulated volume or carryover volume for $900 that's just waiting to be cashed. Every time you can do 100 PV on that weaker leg, you're going to get that check for $18. So that's pretty impressive, and it's definitely something to shoot for. But now let's think about it. And if you've got 20,000 PV in your weak leg, just double that number. So it'd be 900 times 2, which is 1,800. You've got a checking account for 1,800 sitting there. And I know that, a lot of people sometimes get discouraged with the business, or how hard it is to recruit, or the extra hours you have to spend on Facebook or on the internet or on your phone to do it. But when you think about how big your checking account in terms of carryover volume is over there, then you can really start to put in perspective, what it's worth to put in that extra time into your business. So if you've got a checking account over there for $5,000 and it would take you a long time to earn that in your regular job, or maybe you don't even have another job, then put that into perspective, how much you're willing to work to get that checking account that's already there in accumulated volume. And so again, if you had 30,000 PV in accumulated volume, just take that 900 and times it by 3. And I wanted to do it for people that had a lot of volume, because we talked to one girl yesterday in the group that had 170,000. So I wanted to figure that out. If you had 100,000 PV in your carryover volume and your strong leg, divide that number by 200. That comes out to be 500 cycles that you have the potential to do. 500 times 18 as a diamond comes out to be $9,000. So I'm not sure how many people in the group have that much accumulated volume, but if you do, and a spouse or a family member is saying, this business not working for you, show them your checking account that says you've got $9,000 sitting there and waiting to happen, and then hopefully maybe they can support you more. And as you work that weak leg and earn those extra bigger checks, then I think you'll find that they kind of come around. So I know a lot of numbers in this, some new concepts with PV, TV, carryover volume, master flush, and it can be confusing, but it's a video here now. It's in the group. It's gonna remain, I think, on my Facebook like page or somewhere on YouTube once I give it to my video person. So go back through the video as many times as you need, where the stuff that I'm saying is no longer magical mystery stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, Jason's just kind of focusing on pretty basic concepts, mostly just talking about a cycle bonus that happens every time you do 200 and 100 on each leg, and then this concept of carryover volume. So I hope that helps. This may have been a little bit more technical or longer than some of the other videos, but I think it's an important thing that you can drive a lot of motivation to do your business when you realize how much income potential comes through doing volume. All right, thanks everybody, and have a great weekend.